Hello everyone, my name is Tom, and for this presentation today, I'm going to be talking about Mary Ainsworth and Harry Harlow's research on the attachment theory and comparing them. Harry Harlow's experiment in 1958, Harry Harlow thought out an experiment to test the attachment theory. Harlow separated infant monkeys from their mothers after birth and placed them in cages with access to two replicant mothers, one made of wire supplied with a feeding mechanism and one covered in a soft cloth with no mechanism. The wired monkey experiment procedure followed the aim to analyze whether provision of food or contact comfort is more important in the formation of an infant mother attachment. The participants of this experiment were eight newly born rhesus monkeys separated from their mothers at birth. So these monkeys had no former experience with what it's like to have a real mother. The only sort of concept of comfort that they had was from these replicant mothers that Harlow had provided for them. So group 1 of this experiment was monkeys in a cage with a food supplying cloth mother and a wire mother without the food supplier. Group 2 had monkeys, the same sort of situation with monkeys in a cage with a food supplying wire mother and a cloth mother that didn't supply food. So let's swap this time. The independent variable was the food provided by the wire or the cloth mother. That was the thing that was swapped. The dependent variable was how much time the monkeys would spend with either or mother and how comforted they were by whatever mother he was analyzing at the time. So what Harry Harlow concluded from this experiment was that for a monkey to develop regularly, it must interact with an object to which it can seek comfort from during its critical period of development, which is its infancy. Harlow witnessed behavioral differences between monkeys with replica mothers and ones that had regular natural mothers. These include, for the one with replica mothers, they experienced timidness, social ineptness, they were bullied by the other monkeys they were put with after the experiment, mating difficulty, and the female monkeys that had the replica mothers were incompetent mothers. They didn't really understand how to raise a child. It was also concluded that early maternal deprivation causes emotional damage but is reversible if an attachment was made before the end of the critical period. So essentially, if before the critical period ended, if they were given, a natural mother, then they wouldn't suffer emotional problems throughout their entire life. However, if maternal deprivation lasted the entire critical period, then no amount of exposure to mothers or peers could repair the emotional damage that already occurred. It was permanent. If it wasn't done before the end of the vital period of development, then it was permanent and there was nothing they could do to rehabilitate the monkeys. At the time, there was a dominant belief that attachment was related to physical care, such as feeding, which is what he was testing with the feeding mechanism versus the cloth. The cloth monkey, the cloth was the touch, it was the feeling, it was the comfort, and then the wire mother would have the food. So it shows here that the monkeys were more attached to the soft cloth one. So via this experiment, this ideology here was proved wrong. So next we're going to be discussing the wired mother experiment and the ethics behind it. Ultimately, Harlow's work was criticized ethically. His experiments have been seen as unnecessarily cruel and featuring limited value in understanding the effects of deprivation on human infants. It was clear that the monkeys featured in the experiment suffered from emotional harm as a result of the extreme isolation that they had felt. This was evident when the monkeys were placed with a regular monkey. They sat huddled in a corner fearfully. So when they were put with a real monkey, they didn't understand how to react with it and interact with it, because they have been alone their whole lives, and the only real contact they've had with other monkeys or these replicant monkeys was just them not saying anything and not moving. So, and as of 2018, the ethics surrounding animal-based experiments require animals to be both respected and their interests taken into consideration. If Harlow's experiment was done today, it would absolutely be shut down. They would not let the monkeys be harmed the way they were. So next up, we're going to be just talking about Mary Ainsworth's experiment done in 1971 to 1978. Mary Ainsworth created an experiment to test attachment between an infant child and their mothers. The strange situation experiment features, that's what it was called, Features a child who is observed playing for 20 minutes while the caregiver and a stranger that the child had never met before leave and enter the room. They switch. The flow of this experiment goes as follows. So the experiment starts with the mother, the baby, and the experimenter all in a room playing until the experimenter leaves and the mother and the baby are left alone. The baby is given time to sort of explore its environment, and that is, we'll look at that later. And then a stranger that the baby's never met joins the mother and infant. The mother then leaves the stranger and the baby alone. So it's just the mother. It's just the baby and the stranger alone in the room. The mother then returns to the baby, and then the stranger leaves. The mother leaves, so it's just the baby in the room on their own. And then the stranger that they had met before returns and attempts to comfort the child. Then the mother returns at the end, and the stranger leaves. The strange situation experiment procedure follows the aim to assess and measure the quality of an infant's attachment to their primary caregiver and how they react when they aren't present. Participants included 100 middle-class American infants and their mothers. Yeah, they were the ones that were examined. The independent variable of this experiment was different categories of infants' attachment behaviors based on the mother's-child bond. The dependent variable was the child's willingness to be comforted by the stranger when alone. This was the primary thing they were measuring, but they did find a lot of other information when doing this throughout the different stages. This experiment concluded that Mary Ainsworth concluded by this experiment that this strange situation could be used to identify the child's type of attachment. The types are as follows. 70% of the infants were identified as secure. We'll get into what these mean just in a second. 15% were resistant, and the other 15% were labeled as avoidant. The secure infants these are what they were doing at the different stages, were distressed when the mother left, avoidant of the stranger that they hadn't met when they come in and the mother isn't there, when she is there, but when they first meet. Happy when their mother returns, so when the mother returns, they're happy to see them, and use the mother as a base to explore their environment. So when they first got to that new sort of area they were in, they would sort of go out and explore, but then come back to their mums for that comfort. The resistant infants felt intense distress when their mother left. So when their mother leaves, they were crying or begging for her back. They avoided the stranger completely. They would not touch, not look, not speak to them. Not speak, but like vocally express themselves towards them. They resisted contact when mother returned. So when the mother returned, they were sort of still kind of iffy towards her. And the infant cries more than the secure infants and explores less than the secure infants as well. The avoidant infants felt no distress when the mother left, was okay with the stranger, showed little interest when the mother returns, and the mother and the stranger could comfort the infant equally well. So, the strange situation, the ethics in this experiment. The strange situation mostly remained ethical from the beginning to the end of the experiment. However, the experiment did receive slight criticism over the idea of children feeling distressed via separation and stranger anxiety, breaking the ethical guideline of protection of participants. In the researchers' defense, the separation portions were ended prematurely if the child became too stressed. Otherwise, all the ethical factors in psychological experimentation were kept at all times. Okay. I've forgotten how to say this to his name. Hold on. Then it's Isjendorn and Cronenberg's research. Then Isjendorn and Cronenberg did not collect the data. Instead, they analyzed data from other studies using a meta-analysis. The one they primarily looked at was the strange situation experiment, which we had just analyzed before. Then Isjendorn and Cronenberg found that attachment types differed greatly when analyzing and comparing different cultures. Here we're going to look at a graph here that was made from their meta-analysis. We see the different cultures here in the rows, and then the different types that we looked at before in the columns. I've marked the highest and lowest in each column here. So the highest for the secure was the United Kingdom, and then the lowest was China. The highest for avoidant was Germany, and the lowest was Japan. The lowest for resistant was UK, and the highest was Israel. Now we're going to be comparing Harlow versus Ainsworth and the research methods. Harry Harlow focused on analyzing the behaviors of monkeys in reaction to feeding or comfort behavior from a wire replica mother. Comparatively, the work by Mary Ainsworth fixated around human infants and attachment behaviors shown in the strange situation experiment. Ainsworth's work involved the aspects of separation and reunion, which Harlow's research did not. Harlow's experiment analyzed how the monkeys would react in a seemingly endangering moment for the subject, whilst Ainsworth analyzed how infants would react over slight distress. So, in Harlow's experiment, he would sort of analyze the monkey in this super dire situation where they are extremely scared of this extremely scary robot that pretty much would just imitate what a scary thing would be like for a monkey. But for the baby in Ainsworth experiment, it wasn't really this crazy situation. Their mother had just left the room. So it was still distressing, but it wasn't to the same level that this monkey was terrified for his life, practically. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at the difference between Harlow and Ainsworth and their findings. Whilst both researchers analysed attachment theory, Harlow's experiments resulted that for a monkey to develop regularly, it must interact with an object to which it can seek comfort from during the critical period of development. Ainsworth concluded that infants holding differing types of attachment towards their primary caregiver, the type would change the way that infants would react in certain situations. Where their findings differ is as Harlow looks at the monkeys as being all the same in terms of attachment and their problems with attaching, Ainsworth presents the concept that there are differing types of attachment levels between infants. Harlow versus Ainsworth impact. Via Harlow's research, social workers understand risk factors in child neglect and abuse, and neglect and abuse, such as a lack of comfort in critical portions of infancy, and these social workers work to intervene this before it is too late. The strange situation experiment was a breakthrough in identifying different attachment types in infants. Ainsworth's research showed that the method caregivers take when responding to a child can have a lasting impact on their emotional development and how they react in stressful situations. Both experiments made major leaps in terms of attachment theory surrounding infants. And that is the presentation. Thank you for listening. And here's the referencing.